If a fertility doctor inseminates a patient with his own sperm without her consent, is it a crime? Believe it or not, in over 40 states, the answer is no. Bioethicist, professor of law, and author of Taking Baby Steps, How Patients and Fertility Clinics Collaborate in Conception, joins us now via Skype to help break down some of the ethical issues in what we're going to call fertility fraud. And you say one of the biggest issues is determining harm and consent. Can you talk a little bit about that concept of harm and consent?
Sure, I think there are several angles here. So, for example, consent is usually thought of by prosecutors as sort of a consent for all purposes for all sorts of acts. So if a person consents to artificial insemination once, they consent to artificial insemination with any sperm, even the doctors, and that's manifestly not true. That was never the standard of care, as we've talked about. So I think consent, it was very important to go to a doctor whom you trusted, who would be ethical, who would not use you to further their own illicit desires. What is the harm here? Well, doctors did what patients told them to do. That was the reason why certain people went to these doctors. They were trusted, right? What if your doctor doesn't do what you're telling him to do? Well, that's a really big problem. That's a legal problem. That's a crime.
And Jody, what about the concept of pursuing these type of situations as a medical assault? Is that going to be a uphill battle? Or
I do think so. And you can look at this as one of two ways. So originally, people, bioethicists such as myself, although the generation before me, tried very, very hard to separate the idea of donation on one hand from the idea of sex on the other. And I think we've been so successful with that now we look upon the act of donation as something that is in no way connected with sex. And what this does when we get these fertility fraud cases, it introduces a big ick factor because the doctor is actually procuring the sample in some cases minutes before, just a very short time before the insemination, because viable sperm is fresh sperm. Fresh sperm only is viable for so long after it is procured.
But what about this issue of the emotional distress that gets suffered? I know that that's not a term that comes up so much in criminal courts, but in civil courts, can some of these victims actually receive some type of compensation for all of the stress and the pain that they've been through? In Eve's case, she had a relationship with another family for over 13 years, and there are true emotional bonds that were created here.
I think you can get damages for all types of violations, and actually in the criminal case too. So one of my earlier projects involves closure from criminal events like terrorism or murder. And closure is, I think, one of the very reasons why you pursue certain forms of accountability. Yeah. And Eve is personally one of my heroes because she is brave and courageous in putting herself out there and trying to seek change. Those who try to seek change through a lawsuit, criminal or civil, also are trying to tell their story. They're trying to get accountability. And a key part of that is, I think, the emotional distress damages that you mentioned. It's hard to imagine an act that would unsettle someone's personal identity more than learning that they were the victims of fertility fraud.